Education is failing because students are running the classroom and teachers have no authority. I don't know what's happened to education. It breaks my heart. I wanted to be a teacher since I was in the 4th grade. Now I'm a teacher and I'm miserable a lot. I love the act of teaching. I love changing students' minds and helping them develop into smart individuals, but I don't do that. I don't get to teach. I spend my day managing behaviors and teaching students how to regulate their emotions. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a behavior specialist. I'm a teacher, and most of my job is managing behaviors. Most of my job is reaching out to admin and parents. That's not what I signed up for, and that's why so many teachers are leaving the profession.
I relate to this teacher 100%. I entered the classroom in 2013 after joining Teach for America, and all the promo videos showed kids that were well engaged and well-behaved and focused, and they just love to learn. And to be truthful with you, that's what I remember from my schooling experience. I constantly get people commenting that kids will be kids and that teachers are having too high of an expectation for student behavior. But I just think back to how it was when I was growing up, and it was so normal for kids to be able to sit in desks, in rows, look forward, and listen to the teacher. It wasn't a huge deal. I never remember teachers, even in elementary school, having to stop every 5 minutes to correct behavior. And I definitely don't remember kids endlessly arguing with teachers and debating with them and complaining constantly. Back in my day, kids knew that school was a place where you work and you learn. Yes, you had recess. Yes, you had PE and specials class. Yes, there were occasional parties and movie days, but by and large, we understood that school meant work. However, by the time I entered the classroom in 2013, it's like the landscape had completely changed. When I was growing up, it wasn't banned to take away recess. Kids were allowed to write lines like, "I will not chew gum in class," 25 times. Teachers could still write a kid's name on the board if they had a discipline infraction. We had clip charts where either kids would have to move their clip down a color if they misbehaved, or they might have to pull a ticket if the teacher did have to redirect them, which again was really, really rare. But by the time I entered the classroom, things were starting to go the route of feel-good vibes. I was told that parents were complaining that I was taking away too many dojo points on Class Dojo and that it wasn't good for the kids' self-esteem. I was told having kids write the same line over and over was considered corporal punishment. At the beginning of the year, I could take away recess, but by the end of the year, they're saying, no, kids have to still be moving and engaging at recess. You need to create structured play for them instead of them getting to go play with their friends. And it just became really clear that if a kid complained about a consequence to their parents, and the parents complained to the school, we had to change what we were doing as teachers, and that was unheard of when I was growing up in the 90s. So that's what we mean when we say kids are running the show. They learn really fast that all they have to do is cry and complain, and it's like the world stops to cater to them, including their parents. And believe it or not, this makes teaching feel miserable. It's not always the big things like kids melting down and throwing desks. By and large, 90% of the issues that I had were the little things that were uncontrollable. And the reason is, if a teacher is having to constantly stop and make behavior adjustments or commentary on behavior, then you can't really get deep into the content that you're trying to teach. And let me tell you, it's exhausting. These next two teachers are going to explain what a day in the life of a teacher looks like.
These kids cannot be quiet. Like literally, physically cannot be quiet. And it's not just talking that's the problem. Just noise in general. It is constant no matter what I'm doing. I could be doing direct instruction. They could be working with partners by themselves, whatever. It is constant, whether it's this or the tapping or just the random noises that they make all the time. 6, 7, 6, 7. Like, why can you not be quiet? Like, the overstimulation is just to a max. Like, I can't even deal. Not only that, they've got the stupid fidget toys that are making noise. It is constant. What are we doing to these kids that they just can't sit there and just be quiet for even 10 minutes at a time? I truly don't understand.
These kids do the most annoying things. Because why are you tapping on your desk in the middle of me teaching? Why are you digging through your backpack? And then I ask you, what do you need? And you say, nothing. So why are you in there? When somebody is whispering and they're trying to get your attention, you have to say, stop it! Sir, I had no idea that he was distracting you or trying to get your attention. I just heard you out loud. Why when you tell these kids to stop talking, they think that means to talk softer and whisper. I want you to shut up, please. Balling the paper up and tearing it into tiny pieces just to go and throw it in the trash. Teachers are trying here. We are trying. We're trying to have patience. We are trying to teach your children the youth of America, but baby, the youth is not making it easy.
This is so true. As a teacher, I tried many different grades. I started out with 4th grade, then I jumped to 7th and 8th grade. That was a nightmare. Then I went down to 6th grade. And by the time I taught 5th grade in 2019, I had already seen a huge shift. When I started with 4th graders in 2013, yes, they were chatty. They really liked to talk. That was probably every teacher's biggest struggle. But by the time I got to 2019 and I was teaching 5th graders, it truly felt like I was teaching kindergarten or 1st graders. That's also where I really felt like I started to see the hive mind behaviors. I guess now it's kids saying 6, 7. A couple years ago, it was mewing. And I think I just blocked out the memories of exactly what the kids were doing in 2019. But I just remember the constant noises, the constant tapping. My boy students especially falling out of their chair, making really weird noises, ripping papers up, breaking pencils in half, tearing books apart. And with the girls, again, a lot of chatting. I finally ended up quitting in 2021. And this time I was working with 6th grade. And again, I just had what felt to me like abnormally immature behavior. And so from everything that I'm hearing post-pandemic teaching, the students are behaving much worse. And again, I know that some people in the comments will probably say that what these teachers are describing isn't really a big deal. Yes, kids are silly. Yes, they talk. Yes, they tend to imitate each other and catch on to trends. But I think the biggest difference, again, is teachers' lack of ability to stop the behavior. At least in the good old days, with something like a clip chart system, it's like, hey, you've had 3 warnings, now you have a consequence, or now you're missing recess, or now I'm calling home, or now, you're having to sit out for something that you want to do. But now with our positive vibes teaching, none of that is allowed. What we were expected to do, especially towards the end of my teaching career, is just talk to kids about everything. At the last district I was a part of, they had a system called BIST, B-I-S-T. It was like Behavior Intervention Systems Training or something like that. And essentially, the first step was a warning. The second step was a think sheet. The next step was a safe seat within the classroom. And the final step was getting moved to a teacher's buddy room. But a lot of times you had to have documentation and explaining why you had to do that. And I will say, for a small select group of students, BIST sort of worked because they were motivated by not wanting to have the teacher unhappy with them. But for the kids with the discipline problems, they often thrive on the teacher not being happy with them, and they specifically seek to annoy the teacher on purpose. So sometimes the extra attention felt like it was just rewarding those kids' bad behavior. But more often than not, what I started to find is that behavior would escalate. In the first couple of weeks of school, kids are testing things out. There's new group dynamics, and the more naughty students start pushing immediately, often the first day, and they're looking to find out what's going to happen. What is this teacher going to do when I break the rule? In the old days with clear-cut behavior systems, they found out immediately, if I break this rule, the teacher's going to address it. However, it's not practical in real life once you remove all so-called negative consequences. It's not practical to stop and have a conversation over every little thing. Then more students start acting up, and since the teacher doesn't have time to stop and talk, more kids misbehave. And the problem just snowballs. And then a low hum of talking, noise, distracted behavior kind of becomes the baseline. And then you have too many students engaging in that behavior to do the whole think sheet, safe seat, move them out of the classroom scenario. So by taking away quick punitive measures like writing the name on the board, 3 strikes you're out, pulling a ticket, there's no efficient way for teachers to say, hey, you're breaking expectations, boom. So from that point, things can easily go off the rails. And different teachers handle it differently. I did attempt to call a ton of parents constantly. I did do the thing where you pull the kid to the side and have one-on-one conversations with them. I did a lot of what's called behavior narration, where you say, I see Billy sitting up straight, looking at the board and following along. Great job. But it's extremely exhausting and inauthentic when you can't just say, hey, stop it. And kids catch on to it quickly. So what happens over time is there's less and less instruction happening, because either you're trying to teach over the low hum of annoyance and other kids are getting distracted and they're not listening, or you're having to stop and try to individually talk to people, individually give out think sheets, individually send kids to other rooms. I had to move seats all the time, like, hey, you, please move over there. Thank you so much. And then they'd want to argue back. It just becomes a kind of a circus. I will say this all goes back to not having consequences. And I think another problem is just that parents are not requiring good behavior at home. I don't know how else to say it. I think there was a time in society where annoying child behavior was shunned and corrected quickly. But that has disappeared. I look around grocery stores and public places, and kids are regularly allowed to be a menace. It doesn't matter if it's a nice restaurant. It doesn't matter if it's a cruise ship where people paid thousands of dollars to be there. Kids make noise, they run amok, they're going wild, they're whining, and parents aren't doing anything about it. So I would say teachers are having to deal with problems that they did not have to deal with in a mass kind of way. Maybe back in the day, there was a few troubled kids, but now it feels like norm is off behavior, and the 3 to 5 kids that are always on point are like heroes to teachers at this point. Whereas maybe 20, 25 years ago, most kids were following along, listening, and they could be quiet, and that was just normal. So this feeds into the next video, and it's the idea that kids are coming in with less background knowledge, less home training, as we say in the South, and teachers and other people that work with kids are noticing.
I've been a preschool teacher. I've been a nanny for kids ages from infant to high school, okay? There are 3rd graders, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders that cannot read a chapter book. They go to the library and the only thing that they're grabbing is picture books. They're not potty trained. They're going into kindergarten, soiling themselves, not knowing how to use the toilet. Just like 1 or 2 kids, okay? It's like 5, 10 per class. Kids cannot sit through a movie.
I feel like my young students do not have the background knowledge that I would expect them to have at their age and grade level. So here's an example. I had a student a while back. I was doing a vocal warm-up with them, and they're probably about 9 or 10 years old, and I was going to teach them an exercise that involves the months of the year in order. So when I started to teach them this exercise, they go, oh, I don't know the months. I don't know the months in order. And I was like, oh, well, maybe 9 and 10-year-olds, 4th and 5th graders, like, don't know the months. I was thinking back to when I was in 1st grade and my teacher had each of the calendar months, like, in a row, in order, with, like, all of our birthdays. I definitely learned the months when I was 6. I've also noticed some things that I think are generational, such as not recognizing, like, an analog clock face, not knowing how many quarters or cents are in a dollar.
Now, I have a ton of theories about why kids are coming in with so much less background knowledge. For one, schools are absolutely losing veteran teachers. When you don't have as many teachers that were in education for the past 20 or 30 years, we're losing that intergenerational connection of what content knowledge is important and how to teach it. So we're constantly getting an influx of very young teachers that might have grown up in similar ways to some of these students. So they don't even know what they're missing. missing. There is also an insanely high administrator turnover. Every single school that I taught at either had a new principal or the principal had been in the building for less than 3 years. So with that comes different expectations, and it's the same for district admin too, which means that curriculum is constantly changing. I worked at 5 different school buildings, and every single building I worked at was implementing a brand new curriculum in one of the subjects. And oddly enough, sometimes we would have new curriculum initiatives in December. So this constant experimentation lends itself to kids missing vital skills. And we've touched on this channel a little bit about the reading wars and how schools stopped teaching phonics, and many of them are just now coming back to that, but of course that's an issue too. I've also talked about the crazy changes in how math is taught with Common Core, and then some states decided not to do Common Core, but they took all the same strategies and just relabeled it, and I think that has also affected the younger generations of kids. And I don't exactly know what it is, but something has changed in early childhood education. I never taught younger than 4th grade, so I don't know as much about that. All I know is that every single year, kids were coming in anywhere between 1 to 3 grades behind, and this was 80% of the students. Routinely, with the exception of the year I taught at private school, only 20% or less of students were coming in testing on grade level. So I think what's happening is kids are falling behind and they're just not catching up. Another problem is parents are not teaching their children the basics. I've seen a ton of videos about the potty training issue, kids not knowing how to tie their shoes, kids not knowing how to, do the basics like zip up their jacket. And again, it wouldn't be abnormal if that was a few kids, but teachers of younger grades are saying that the vast amount of their students are having issues with things that traditionally parents would have taught. This could be for a million reasons. I think the upsurge of single parent homes and the primary parent having to work more hours, that makes sense about maybe why they're not taking the time to teach their kids some of these things. Of course, the advent of iPad kids, where they're given an iPad from the time they're an infant and they don't let go of it, I think that's creating some of these gaps, because perhaps the games or the entertainment is not always educational. It's just something to keep them focused for the time being, which of course creates the situation of kids that can't sit and focus and stay still. So it's a vicious cycle, but I do think a lot of it starts at home, because I remember my mom taught me how to read before I was 4 years old. I was way ahead and very advanced by the time I got to school. She taught me how to write my name and my letters. She would read to me. Before I could sound out books, I had literally memorized them by looking at the words and hearing her read it so many times, and I would follow along word by word. Way back in the day, she bought me these educational toys. She had this bear that you would put a cassette tape in and it would read you bedtime stories. I mean, she was the literacy queen, and I don't even know if she realized what a big deal that was, but I definitely think kids are lacking that today. So it's unfortunate, because kids are the ones that are soaking in all of these problems of parenting, of society, of the failing school systems, of adults not being able to agree on curriculum or what constitutes a normal, healthy consequence. All of this is filtering down and hurting students. So I just encourage parents to really be involved in your child's education. If you've got to find yourself some old school homeschool manuals that say what a kid should know by each grade, whatever you have to do, I would just encourage parents to make sure your kids are reaching these milestones. Don't just leave it to the school, because sadly, you cannot trust that your kid will come out of that grade knowing what they were supposed to. And now it feels like it's just normal for kids to be so far behind emotionally, intellectually, with communication. Kids are just not in the same place that they were even a couple of decades ago. But parents, you can help this by monitoring screen time, monitoring your school's curriculum, reading with them. If you could just read with them between 20 and 30 minutes a night, that would be life-changing. And teach your kids some manners. Teach teach them how to behave in public, teach them delayed gratification, have them practice sitting and being relatively still in certain situations. Make it a game if you have to. But kids do have the ability to behave. It just has to be expected of them. And increasingly, teachers are not allowed to have a lot of expectations for kids because there's other adults in the building that are making excuses for them. But as a parent, if you just give your kids some basic manners, if they're on grade level with reading, they're going to be light years ahead of their competition. So I feel like I've said enough for this video, but let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's any videos that you want me to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and have a great day.